those poses aren't going to trickle into a good animation. So it's essential that we understand how things are moving and how to make it look the way that it's looking. So this is yoga stuff, and these are some yoga poses that are out there. Oops. All right, so initially looking at a pose like this is called half moon pose. We might go into Maya and say, okay, her hands look like they were up in the air. Like that. And obviously rotate it around. And rotate it around that way. And careful about that too. Look at how I'm like twisting that forearm. There we go. Yeah, so her head is extra big, so you kind of have to compensate for some of these things. And I'm also going to pull these elbows out a bit, which will definitely help the kinking. And then on the Andy rig, on other rigs they may have something different, but there is this stretch here where I can actually stretch it beyond that. There we go. And I think I actually want to take these and pull these more into the side. That makes more sense. And then take this, a little bit more stretch. Woo. A little more stretch, there we go. Okay, so at this point you may say, okay, the hands are above the head, and then all I have to do now is just take the character and go like, well, if you're really ridiculous, then go like that. Okay? But that's not what's happening, obviously, in that pose. Just wait. Come on, Maya. Even if I were to take, like, this, or this one, there we go, and rotate that one into this kind of thing, that's still not what's happening in this kind of pose, okay? Now the trick with all these poses is to put yourself in it. So if you're trying to do something like that, then you should at least try to get yourself into that pose, okay? At least as best you can. It really gives you a sense of what's happening inside your body. So one of the things that's happening in this pose is that her legs, if you look at them, they're not going straight up and down. The legs are actually going like off to the side, right? So if her legs are going off to the side like that because she's twisting, that means her hips are also offsetting. The other thing that's happening is this side here is actually getting pushed off to the side. This side is getting pushed up, and then she's going sideways like that. The more extreme she goes off to the side, the more extreme those movements are going to be there. So it's not simply doing that, because that's not how it would work. It would be more like this. So I'm going to go into the hips first, push that over, rotate the hips like that, and then grab each one of these and rotate that. And then just to get rid of some of the lumpiness, there we go. Now looking at her feet are also together, so her feet have to be together too, so I should put these feet together. Make sure that the knees are together. If we look, this knee is bent in that pose. If we look at another picture like this one, you can see that both feet are on the ground. No knees are bent. They're all perfectly straight. This is actually a backwards bend, but still in no spot is her knee bent. So we have to correct that. And we correct it by kind of raising this up a bit. And then maybe not twisting that so much. And then see how I can kind of twist the hips a little bit there, Twist that a little bit there. There we go. Until we get to that right pose. And then Andy can probably rotate maybe just a smidge more. There we go. Now, we do have limitations. Andy's head is huge, so there's no way that Andy could actually get that to happen. But we do have something else that's happening too. Look at the arms here. This doesn't look right. What doesn't look right about the arms? The shoulders, right? Your shoulder blades stop here, right? Your shoulder can literally only rotate that far. From here up, that's your shoulder blade. That's their clavicle that's moving up. I didn't do any of that to Andy. So I have to go here. I have to rotate that up. Woo. And look already how much more realistic this is looking just by scrunching those up. And that allows me to stretch these out further. Andy can't do yoga. Just gotta adjust some of these other properties here.
So with the Andy rig, with the arms going up past the head, you don't mind some clipping, just not a dramatic amount?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to kind of balance it as to what's in the scene. There was a movie called Final Fantasy that came out like a long time ago.
The Advent Children one?
The what?
That animated one? Or?
Yeah, the 3D one.
Yeah.
They came out with a book about it, like, you know, here's a CG of it. And in that book, like, featured, here's the main girl, and her sleeve is like going like right through her arm. It's just a funny thing. All right, so pretty close. There we go. So that pose is looking a lot better. It's looking like a lot more natural. Thinking about how we would do this, this is still not correct fully, because Andy doesn't look like she's balanced, okay? When you lean your body over, especially that far to the side, you have to compensate by pushing your weight the other way. And the only way we can do that is by pushing the hips. So if we were to draw a straight line down the center here, Andy would tip over, right? Because her center, her body, her weight is like right here. It doesn't feel like it's right there. So I probably need to take these hips a little bit further and push them a little bit more that way. That helps straighten out her knees. And that also helps balance her out. So now she again feels like she's actually leaning over. Your hips go one way, your body goes the other way, and Andy's doing that number. Now some of these you have to really kind of investigate what these are. This is like an actual yoga move that they do. And one of the things that's kind of like an easy trick for this move is if you're like that and you're bending over, it's very easy for me just to twist my hips and then go over and I can go really far. But that's not what the pose is. And here the pose, the hips are perfectly straight. So if I was trying to cheat the move, I could go like that and make it a lot easier for me to get into that pose. So as you're doing these, even if you're going to line yourself up to something like this, you really have to analyze what are the hips doing, what are the shoulders doing, what is this doing, what is that doing. We could also rotate, not rotate, we also turn on some of Andy's face controls too. There we go.
Screaming in agony.
Screaming in agony, it shouldn't hurt. It's relaxing.
Yoga,
You're really
stretching.
bad at it.
There we go, something like that. She's struggling a little bit.
You have to be pretty unflexible to maintain that.
There, dedicated.
Her arms are melting into her face. It's very
There, she's into it.
What's the yoga thing? With the arm, blazing through the skull. That hurts.
There we go. And I think I'm going to take that stretchiness down if I can. See if it's still too much. Nope. Let me get rid of the stretch, and then I'm just going to push these down some more. I really want to tweak this because it just looks funny. There we go. That looks better. Better. There you go. So there's no stretch in that case, and then I can squeeze these together. And then even going so far as to look at what the hands are doing. The hands are doing one of these. Okay, so it's like a gun, like when you're a kid. So if we grab both of these circles, that's where I would rotate these joints from. I'm going to rotate the middle, the ring, and the pinky. Like that. That's pretty close. Look at that. And then the thumb back here. Rotate that. And I can just offset one of the hands. So maybe I just offset this one a little bit that way. And offset this one a little bit that way. There we go. We wouldn't really see the other side of that. So that'd be a pretty convincing pose. It feels like there's weight there. It feels like Andy's leaning off to this side. It feels like she's pushing her weight over to the other side. Okay, these are good poses because not only do they have, you know, these kinds of things, but they also have like descriptions. Like, here's exactly what should be happening. Your knees should be doing this. So many pop-ups. Understanding your hips, 4 poses, foolproof chest and shoulders. So you can really study like all the different stuff that your body is supposed to be doing in all of these, even if you don't want to get into these kinds of poses. So here's half moon pose by pose. Bend your right knee and slide your foot about 6 to 12 inches along the floor. At the same time, reach your hand forward. That's this one. That's not the right pose. What? Fast notes. Use the hips if you feel pain from the ribs. There we go. Stretch our purse. Initiate, exhale. Okay, close. That's even a better picture of it. You can really see how they're stretching this way. If you don't push your hips to that one side, you're going to fall over. So you have to make sure that that's obviously in there. One of these that I found earlier had it. Whatever. You get the idea that one of those has it. So another pose that's out there is triangle. Okay, so this is a properly performed triangle pose. This there is not. So what's the difference between these two poses here? The hand is on the foot? Yeah, the hips, right? So all of these things go into it. All these things have to work. The front knee is bent, right? This here is a little triangle. That's why they call this the triangle pose. This is the big triangle. This one too, look at that one, is like a completely different one. Totally out of there. So you got to do your research. This chin is touching the shoulder. It's like resting inside of the shoulder crook right there. And here we really wouldn't have a lot of the shoulder or the clavicles moving up because the arm is straight out, right? So it's basically just a straight shot. But getting this to look right, getting that line, getting these hips to be straight like this and this to be like that, that's what we'd have to focus on. I'm just going to set a keyframe on all my Andy stuff. There we go. And then I'm going to go to a different frame, and we'll set Andy up for the other one. So what I do first is I always set up just like the feet is like a good spot to start, or the hips. So this one's going to be perfectly straight. This one's going to be like back, like this. Reset these translates. You can see how I'm just kind of resetting each one of these just to get Andy back to his like default pose. For your poses, you can just use that same startup file. So when you set up Andy, you do the character sets, you do the shaders, you do all that stuff. Then you can just use that same file for all of your stuff. All right. So there's Andy's pose. That's probably a little bit too wide. Let's just push that one in a little bit, Andy. Let's grab the hips then and get Andy into it. Okay. So now, just like before, I have to keep in mind where his hips are going to be at. Because I could spend all day long looking at it like this, but until I start to turn this around, I may not see that maybe Andy needs to scoot back a little bit, or forward a little bit, or tweak this front to back position. So it's again something we have to play with. Also, this knee definitely needs to come out over here.
Now, can you have two Andy rigs in the same scene?
Yeah, I could just import another Andy rig in there. So this is going to, I'm going to leave this here. I'm going to grab the yellow one and rotate that slightly. And then I'm going to grab this one and rotate that. Now there's a perfect line. If you look from here at this area to here, there should be a perfectly straight line that happens. Okay? So I need to make sure that on my rig I convey that. There we go. So that's what I'm looking at right now, is getting that perfectly straight line. I can probably squeeze this one in a little bit more. I just have to make sure that I don't buckle the knee. Once the knee starts buckling, that's gone too far. All right, that's good. This hand I know is going to come down like this and rotate it in position. I know that the fingers for this one are going to come back to that. Maybe they'll be squeezed together a little bit instead of being spread like that. And thumb spread, where are you? There you are. That. There we go. Okay. And then this hand will be doing something very similar, so I'm just going to reset these. Once you rotate. Now looking at this pose again, I see basically like a big T kind of shifted a little bit. So here's that first line, and then there's that second line. So there's a bit of an angle between these two shapes that I need to convey. I need to get those two things to work. So looking at this, if I go here, like, set this up like this. There we go. Take this back a bit. Take this down a bit. All right, so you can see how we have this T-pose here and that line there, but we're still not in position, right? So I have to do something to the actual root parts of this to get this to line up right. I have to make sure that Andy is able to sit in there. So I may have to pull this foot back more and then grab the hips and pull the hips back more. Okay, by pulling the hips back more, I'm able to maybe rotate Andy just slightly a bit more. Oops, wrong one. So that's pretty close. How you doing, Rob? And now I can kind of push this one in. I'm going to rotate it out a little bit more. Push that down a little bit more. And then the head is going to look up at the other one. So I need to make sure I rotate the head. I don't do everything in one. There's two controls for the head for a reason. And then this can come up a little bit further. And I think because of the Andy rig, I do need to kind of rotate this up a little bit more. There we go. All right, so you can see how these two poses now are looking very similar. That hand could probably cup a little bit more. I could probably unrotate these hips slightly. Not too much though. There we go. Oops. I think I want to get this hand on the other side. That. There we go. Okay. So now you can see how I can get these two things very close together, but it's not a matter of just kind of eyeballing it, winging it, guessing what it's supposed to look like. You have to break down each pose. You have to break down each piece of the body. You have to look at what each thing is doing and try to get that character into that pose doing that kind of thing. This one too, this is very similar to the sideways bend, except with this one, you're pushing your body forward while you lean this backwards. And this is actually, you're not like collapsing back, you're just like pushing back, this comes up, this goes forward. That's why I call it like a half moon crescent. Because you have all your weight in that thing. So all of these types of poses here, all of these things, that's what, if you're doing yoga poses or dances or fighting or whatever, you have to be able to analyze it. You have to be able to do it. These are nice because they pretty much have written directions. Because they're yoga, because it's something where people need like a step-by-step direction to get into to make sure they're doing it right, you can find that stuff. If you found someone that's doing a punch, you may not be able to find instructions about what their hips are doing and what their shoulders are doing and anything else. Here, they pretty much have all of that kind of stuff. And there's some pretty wild poses in there that can be very tricky to get into. Maybe this one. Maybe I'll look for bigger ones. Size. And
she's like bent in half. It's pretty difficult.
yeah, this one here is really difficult, and then this one too. Okay, the tricky thing with each one of these ones here, and then the ones up there, is that it's not just about like bending at the waist. It's actually about like pushing your hips back and tilting your hips. So you have to make sure you understand how all that mechanics works in order for that to happen. That's the best pose.
Yeah.
Even this one here, this is like, let's see, that's standing bow pose. Like people that can do this pose correctly, it's very tricky to do because there's so much stuff involved in getting yourself in here. She's not doing it right.
Do you do yoga?
I do yoga. As of last week, I started back up again. That's not it either.
Like you didn't say, yeah, it's last week I said.
Yeah. Well, I did it 2 years ago and got back into it. So let's see. Yeah, that one's pretty close.
What's that one pose where you use your arms to sort of give a vibe?
There's a bunch of those. Not a bunch, but a few. We don't do those.
No?
No. See, stuff like this is like great because you get to see like here's a
Just about touch.
Step by step.
Feel of the foot like this. Down, rotate. Several class don't charge forward until you get the proper grip. Okay. Now just kick the leg back. Keep focusing on opening up the chest. Stomach is sucked in. Kick the leg back. You get to a point where the kick now forces the body down. Keep lengthening the spine, stretching the arm away from you. Kicking and stretching forward is 50-50. Sure.
So what they're doing here is they're not just like lifting the foot up. You have to make it look like your character is pushing their body forward and pulling their body back. So you're twisting your body this entire time, getting that to get into this position.
Over the top of the head in the mirror. Keep kicking. Standing leg is locked.
Oh, yeah.
Kick. Change.
So Bikram yoga. Here's another one. We're just gonna skip to the end.
Everything in one. Up. The arms tightly. Now pull the elbows down to open up the shoulder joints. If you can, bring the hands in prayer. And the hands
So in this one, just doing that on your rig could be very tricky because you have to take your right arm and twist it under here. And you can see my hands don't even do that. But then her hands are together and they're like down here.
It's impossible.
Right, it's not impossible. The way she's doing it, look at her shoulders, right?
So they're disconnected.
They're not disconnected, they're stretched out enough. So her shoulders are so far forward that she can get into that pose to do that. At one point, yes, I could.
sit down.
I put on some weight since then.
Feel the hips opening. Now lift the chest up.
Now watch
again.
this one.
Now lift the right leg up high over the left leg and get that foot behind the calf muscle. Again, lift the
Now that one, she has her foot behind her calf. So she's like squatting, your foot's like behind it while you're doing that and standing up. It's very tricky to do, but there's a lot of little mechanical things that are going into making that work.
Square by bringing the knees round to the right, the shoulders square by bringing the arms round to the left. Everything in one line. Chest up more. Suck the
So you look at that pose there, you look at this angle that she's sitting here, you look at the angle of the legs, and that's the stuff that you try to emulate. That's the stuff that you try to get into your rig. That's why they have these things where they do I don't know what that is. So like for stuff like this that doesn't exist, the animator goes out and he actually animates himself doing it. He takes video of himself acting the scenes out so that when he goes to animate, he knows what the character is supposed to be doing. He knows what the poses are in the scene.
Watching you is a giant elephant.
Oh, there can't be people that small. And the first guy would say, "Are you calling me a liar?" And the second guy would say, "If the shoe fits, wear it." And now the fists are flying, and the first guy picks up a brick, and you might want to sit up the pouch for this next part. All right, fat boy, you want some of that? Why?
I'd do it myself, but being a lady, I prefer not to get my hands dirty.
And you can see too how it's kind of like his video is kind of glitchy. So what he does, he videotapes himself, he has the voiceover, and then he times it up inside of Premiere or whatever editing software he's using. So he may speed himself up, slow himself down, cut certain parts out just to help get the flow of it. If he can get this video to look good, then he has really good reference for creating this video. Even if it's exaggerated, even if it's tweaked and modified and whatever else, he has a good starting point.
Sometimes you get too tired of sleep. You get past the point of no return. Kind of feel like that. But anyway, I'll shut up.
Not quite.
How about now? Is this better?
Yeah, sort of.
Come in there.
Kinda losing you. Whoa! Oh!
Which is running Baker video.
we spin the Centennial on the ground like one.
No? The voice? Oh, yeah.
Mayor, I found you.
Knock, knock. This is where you say,
Bruce Almighty.
who's there?
Yeah.
If there were any, who's there?
Turns out I need your help a little bit. Apparently, if that speck keeps moving around, our whole world could be obliterated. So, I need you to find us who's a safer, more stable home, and fast.
So it's not just this crazy guy doing it. There's lots of stuff. Reference.
I feel like animation people have a lot of fun.
So as an animator, you can't be afraid to just like literally get out of your seat and start acting some of the stuff out, portraying some of the stuff, trying out some of these things to see what is actually happening in there. What's making that move work? Because if you don't get the poses, then the whole thing's not going to work. Even if you spent 700 hours on it, it's still not going to work unless you have those poses.
Hi, Justin here. I'm at uni right now.
So now they're just doing jumping references. So let's say you're doing a video game and you need a character to have 3 or 4 different jumps. There's a big jump, a little jump, and a even bigger jump, or a fall, or whatever. Or maybe you have different characters and they jump differently. So these are all different things you can kind of look at. Now the same goes for your reference. If he goofs off, or he kind of like is a little bit shy or timid about it and he doesn't really put himself into it and actually do a good job, you don't have good reference, so you're kind of wasting your time. So in a way, as an animator, you also have to be kind of an actor and start to really get into these things. Like if you want to jump and you want your character to do it a certain way, you videotape it until you're happy with that jump. Then it's a piece of reference. Then you can use it inside of your stuff. Parkour.
Anything jumping, you're gonna get the parkour.
Chef, hope you enjoyed the film, and if so, you will surely.
There's a lot of views for no license sites.
I think some people just get lucky on news. Because, like, I have a really shitty video on YouTube.
So here you have the reference. Here you have the blocking in stage. And there you have the final stage. So our first character thing we're doing is poses. Our first character thing we're doing is just trying to figure out how do we move the character and get him into these strong poses. Those poses lead to the blocking. The blocking leads to that final animation. If we don't get a good strong walk pose, or a good strong pose when we do our actual animation stuff, it just doesn't work. It's a weird video. All right, so